Hey everybody, this is AomIsHot22. So I'm just gonna continue making some videos at 200 Zoom. I haven't produced a video in 5 months. I actually made another one. Maybe I'll post that one first, but we'll see what happens. I'm just gonna kind of dick around in the Zoom 200 streets today. I am going to Macau tomorrow for a month. So this limiting range is supposed to be like relatively strong. Like it doesn't interact with the 5 and 3 nearly as often, and we're obviously going to have like all the two pairs, and we're going to check threes and fives. I'm going to check threes and fives at a pure frequency pre-flop. However, I don't think makes a whole lot of sense to. Here, there are a number of options. Like just from a simplistic perspective, I think like using one probe sizing is going to be a hell of a lot easier to balance. However, using like huge probes here makes quite a bit of sense from a rolling an 85 here. I'm just going to go with the call and turn. I'm going to continue just using a 2/3 probe. This was mixed on the flop. This is obviously relatively high expected value board for the in position cold caller. Just really, we have a very concentrated range of like nines and eights and tens and sevens. I think at least that's most people's perceptions of our range. And people's C bets here are going to be very infrequent. We will see this guy front door probably too many strong hands. And we roll a 95. This hand is a pure bet, so we don't actually have an option. I'm just using a small size for anything that I bet here. It's not really necessary to use larger bets on the flop. In terms of the turn bet sizing, if he doesn't have the appropriate frequency of slow plays, we end up getting to scale up a little bit more. However, I'm just using a simplified strategy, and I just use kind of like the hotkey. However, going larger is fine. I don't want to be too greedy and like go smaller with like a7 of hearts and then go massive with obviously pocket nines in this sort of a hand. So I just like to use the same sort of sizing. Obviously, we're repping incredibly strong. He decides to check raise massive. We're going to end up jamming this hand in. I tend to just take the same amount of time with everything. Occasionally, he'll have like a6 of hearts. I don't think he's actually going to find enough bluffs here. Optimally, I think we probably should find some slow plays. So apparently, he did find one of the infrequent bluffs, which is cool. Very cool. The queen jack ends up being mixed pre-flop. Yeah, good for him. I wonder what our frequency is for. And we're just 3-betting this. I wonder what our frequency for call is in that node. So the 9 and the 2 obviously interact with the out of position, or sorry, the in position player quite well. We're not going to have any leads here. Deuce 4 we could also pitch pre-flop. Very clear continue. I don't think there's any 3-bet with this exact combo. River, in terms of like where we are in our range, we're going to continue some hands like king, queen, king, jack on the flop. In terms of the amount of flushes we have, though, we actually will. So given that I didn't realize, I think we're just supposed to mostly shove here. But we do roll a high number. We're going to check. And I don't want to say mostly shove because that's not really true, actually. But we end up making a bunch of like ace 5. We obviously have a bunch of pocket 5. Oh, shit. I didn't even realize that. Oh, yeah. I'm definitely supposed to be shoving this hand, actually. We're just not finding enough bluffs here. We end up 3-betting. I don't want to discuss my exact strategy here, but a number of a number of sizings end up being quite reasonable on the flop, as well as like finding some hints of check. In an equilibrium model, this particular hand will do a decent amount of checking. However, I've like simplified my strategy a bit more. Turn the king queen with the king of hearts, fairly high frequency check when we. I mean, we're not like betting it when we roll 100 here, not having any leads. We end up doing a fair bit of slow playing with like the aces, the kings, some queens on the river. So essentially there's going to be an 8. I believe our minimum value here is going to be 1 pair. Obviously, in terms of the weakest pairs, it will be value betting. Basically something like king 9. Rolling at 14, we need to bluff. I think mostly we're just going to be choosing like smaller bets. We could go a bit larger given that I think we should probably actually end up sizing this $4 for big blind race. I'm just going to pitch. We should probably actually scale up a bit more given that we're just repping a lot of overpairs. I think my sizing was slightly too small. Yeah, I think it's a bit too small. Cold Smile, it's kind of an interesting turn check. A lot of error just ends up getting probed on the turn. I feel like this guy, once he ends up checking the turn, just going to have a fairly high frequency of exactly 1 pairs and decent bit of 4x as well. Those are supposed to get probed a lot. Obviously, the ace is really good to call with. King Queen is finally played. This hand is not going to 3-bet the flop. And so we're not going to be 3-betting the flop ever with like king 10, whereas he's not really check raising so often with those sort of hands, as well as like 10-8. He's probably not check raising those terribly often, especially to that sizing. Our hand is a pure continue regardless as a call. And river, I am going to be raising a bunch of straights on the turn, even though I'm supposed to be calling optimally. I just don't think this guy finds enough natural bluffs for betting flop, turn, and river. Find it fairly unlikely. I'm going to not even really think about it and just find a pitch against that recreational. Against this guy's very small flop raise, I think occasionally we're supposed to be finding a 3-bet with this combo with the clubs and the fact that I rolled a low number. I think finding a flop 3-bet here with this exact combo makes some sense. I think checking 100% of our range on the turn, however, given that we don't need to be like getting much protection here with hands exactly like queens to aces, and also he'll end up raising a bunch of jack X, which devalues our queens to aces. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense for us to have too many bets on the turn. I don't know what the best option is here. I feel like if we end up blocking, we end up getting some occasional spazzes out of just like random bluffs, and then occasionally he does raise like an 8 or something. I mean, I don't know what the best option is, but I'm kind of like putting a reasonable weight into this guy, just like randomly spazzing with king 10. Potentially that's incorrect. So he had 6s. Don't think that's really a high frequency play on flop. So we end up c-betting small. He min raises almost. We 3-bet the flop very small. He calls. Okay. Cool. And maybe my idea about having clubs here and having a low number, I mean, I'm also kind of like just making the assumption that he does. This should be a bit larger. He does end up having probably too many just like random 9x king 10 hands, and doesn't have enough like slow played aces and kings and queens and whatnot. I felt like this would just be a fine strategic option versus the recreational guy. Obviously, it worked out, but yeah, I mean, maybe my play is not amazing versus a recreational. Versus a regular, I'm totally fine with it, given the number that I rolled, but I probably don't play exploitatively against recreational players as well as I probably should. We're gonna pitch this. This probably should be full 3. Just waiting for hands, as we so often do at 200 Zoom. At this time, not a whole lot of people in the pool right now, only 35 people. It's lessened and lessened over the years. Nines is just going to have to mix against 5x, but mostly call. Rolling 86, we're going to go with the occasional fold. We don't want to be continuing nines like 100% of the time against 5x. We want to continue at something like 75, 80 ish percent. When you end up looking at the solutions, like someone like Sauce will end up continuing that probably 100%. A lot of other people are going to continue that very often. However, I think I'm very tempted to 3-bet Chirpy Box just because I think I'm going to make an exploitative 3-bet. I think this very small isolation sizing is just very full of shit, and not containing enough hands like Ace King, Ace Queen, pocket kings, jacks. I think it's like a very convenient sizing for something like 9, 10, ace 5, da 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 da. Potentially I'm reading too much into this, and I didn't actually realize we were 200 something blinds deep. However, I like to try to exploit some of these things occasionally. Now I'm very aware of how whaley this sort of like speech that I'm giving is, and then just how like screwed my range is. However, I played with Chirpy Box in absolute shit ton, and again, I still feel like an absolute whale, continuing to just like justify stuff like I'm talking about GTO play, and then the next thing I'm doing this 6s against 2.5x with a recreational, the big blind, and a rec opening UTG. It's going to be a fine continue. And this hand will just raise fairly often when his c-bet frequency is too high. I think ABC Hag's c-bet frequency on such a high EV board is going to be fairly high more often than it. He's going to be c-betting more often than he should, and then he's not going to find enough 3-bets as well. Going to go with the turn check with this combo. Obviously, easy continue on the turn. A7. Did he have a... Yeah, obviously bad c-bet at any reasonable frequency, and then bad call. Okay. This is not a defense. We've got loads and loads of ace-x, and we end up making some hands like king deuce, king 9, these sort of things. A lot of our like ace 9, ace 6, ace 2 end up raising the turn. So we're not having those, but we do have some 2 pairs, and we have a load of ace-x, which are just going to block most of what he's representing. Occasionally some king x to clubs. However, I don't think the king is as relevant as it might seem. Like we might justify he's repping kings or ace king, but I think an ace is fairly relevant. I don't know. It depends on what we think he's shoving there. Potentially he's just always got value, and he just bluffs something like 2/3 smaller. I kind of don't want to always do this 100% of the time with Chirpy Box. Just going to fold this time. So it's not like I'm doing that 100% in that particular situation, but I'm probably doing it more often than not. Obviously, there's the fact that I just won't pick up on it, and that will happen pretty often. And then my frequency is obviously not 100% if I'm not doing it with that combo all the time. Meaning that when I see aces, But when I see aces, I'm always 3-betting. When I see something like I'm checking range out of position in this particular situation. I'm going to go with the river check. 15 is going to be a fold. It's a huge, absolutely massive squeeze. Very likely to be trying to take advantage of this river. We're bottom. We're not continuing that. Jack isn't turning itself into a bluff. But, yep, not a continue. Chirpy box is 40% here. We're only going to have small bets on the turn. At equilibrium, we end up getting to have some larger bets, just given the fact that both of these guys like Chirpy's going to be front dooring too many hands out of the small blind, I think, and the in position guy's not going to have enough slow plays and probably not check enough flush draws, and as a result of that, we end up getting to use larger sizings. But I don't want to like play strategies that are so assumptive that kind of like lose a bunch of EV if I'm wrong. So I'm just going to continue with the small bets because I quite enjoy that sort of a defensive, easy, let's be balanced strategy. We've been going for 16 minutes. I think these shorter YouTube videos actually have like a decent bit more retention, and I should probably end up keeping the videos to somewhere like 10 to 15 minutes. I think that would be decently better. So I just tend to check range here, but I won't actually check range on ace king 8 versus 2 Rex. I do something fairly close in general. This is not worth much. The queen of spades I'm always continuing. It just seems like it needs to be a call needing 12% equity. Feels like a decent mistake if I fold it. Like maybe not decent, but like there's just too many random whale hands that these guys can show up with that are betting like this small. We could go larger with ace king here against a recreational that opens. Oh man, but I'm just calling. He's going to have an ace, an absolute shit ton, but he just has too many random like 5-6 of spades or like 5-4 spades that decide to break off. Flop, I'm C betting range. Depending on people's limping and limp raising frequencies, we don't do this at a pure frequency, but when people just limp too many bad hands and they don't have enough limp re-raises, which seems like the incentive in the 200 zoom environment, given the fact that we're gonna check this. Given the fact that people don't actually ISO enough, very clear call. He'll just have quads a lot and a queen. Slightly surprised the recreational just decided to go so large with this bluff on the river. I felt fairly strong that he was just going to have a strong hand really often. And obviously he'll have this sometimes, but had a pretty strong intuition that this was just going to be a decent hand once he ended up betting the river so big. So we'll end up sitting out next big blind. Just coming close to like a range check on the flop, forcing in position to actually balance a proper strategy here. Here, rolling a 34. I tend to think just 2/3 or check is the option that I should be taking from a like easy balance strategy. But when he's a wreck and he really is a fucked range, I mean, there's a decent amount of overbetting that can go on. It's fairly hard to balance though. That's the reason why I don't want to just like do these weird sizes with greediness or whatever. He also will continue a bunch of like weak pairs that he's not necessarily supposed to. Rolling at 28 here, I'm actually supposed to find the frequency of praise with this exact combo. It's not so frequent. I'm going to go with the call, though. I'm probably calling this a bit more often than I'm supposed to. If I'm rolling 28 here, obviously, like, yeah, he's repping really polar, and I don't want to get 3-bet on the flop, but that's just going to be a strategic option that happens. Having an 11 on the turn, however, it's not a great. It's really not a very standard sizing. Or I'm checking this hand down and winning against like 8-7 of hearts occasionally, but mostly just losing. So he has jacks. Your average recreational logic. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. This is AomIsHot22, and peace out.